Hello to all my friends and family, and welcome to this episode of Jim's 5am Club. I just can't believe how glorious this weather is. It's sunny, the skies are blue, it's Thursday, and Sydney town is at its sparkling best. I've said it time and time again that autumn is without doubt the best season to experience Sydney, because the days are clear, not too cold, the skies are blue, and it's just an awesome time to be around this wonderful city. Anyway, let's go on a walk and talk. And what I want to do today is take you through a book summary, another book summary, an interesting book summary at that, and it's entitled Everything is Obvious. Everything is Obvious by Duncan J Watts. So an interesting book which delves into the whole concept of common sense. And what we end up finding is that common sense, whilst we all think that we have it, this book brings to our attention that the common sense that we think that we have isn't all that common sense after all, because what happens is we're all infected. We're all infected by many different biases which shape the way we see things, shape the way we receive things, shape the way we communicate things and have things communicated to us, that it's not quite as we think in terms of what common sense is. Anyway, let's go for a walk and talk along this overseas passenger terminal. It's been a while since we've had a ship come into Sydney Harbour and dock here, but hopefully over the next couple of years things will slowly come back to normal and we'll get to have tourism starting to pick up. Maybe a couple of years out, who knows. It's not going to be as quick as what I first thought it was going to be, because COVID-19, whilst in Australia we've got it fairly well under control and fairly well managed, there are many countries throughout the world who are absolutely struggling, struggling not only with the virus, but they're also struggling with the rollout of the vaccine program, which is very sad and disappointing at that. Anyway, let's get back on point and talk about this book summary entitled Everything is Obvious. What the author says here in one of the opening quotes from the book is that common sense is wonderful at making sense of the world, but not necessarily at understanding the world around us. I'll just pause for a while for that to sink in, because the author then invites us to think about the following. If you rely on common sense and common sense alone, then you're probably not accounting for the many cognitive biases that are at play and that infect us all. Because the bottom line is that we are all infected by a number of biases, as I mentioned before, that influence our decision making and how we interpret the world. People, even very smart people, and we're surrounded by lots of smart people, can be manipulated by the playing of these biases. And the sort of biases that the author raises and talks about are things such as default biases, priming biases, anchoring biases, and a number of different biases. There are hundreds and hundreds of biases which influence the way we see the world and the way we perceive reality. So the author goes on to say a few more things which are really interesting as well. And he says that instead of trying to predict our future, you're better off just staying in the present and working with what you got. Because at least what you have is less likely to be a figment of your imagination, so to speak. But if we push it out into the future and we start mulling over and talking about it, and what happens is that our expectations are, as I said before, shaped by many biases that we have, many hopes, many fears, and the outcome that we expect or we predict may never eventuate because, from the very, very beginning, our decision making, our view of things were deeply flawed and were never going to survive the test of time anyway. The author then goes on to talk about a few things which are very interesting, and the author says that predicting human behaviour, and we've all come across this over time, predicting human behaviour is really, really tough because there are dozens and dozens of biases at play that impact not only us but the people around us. Let me just get past here and we'll continue talking. There's a little meeting happening here, so I'll just quieten down before I go up to the top. But how beautiful is Sydney. Absolutely magnificent and glorious. Let me go up the top here so I don't interrupt the meeting down here. So let's continue here. So the author then goes on to say and to remind us of something which is really important, that relying on common sense is a bad strategy, especially, listen for this one here, especially when you're making important decisions. So all of those people that surround us and start boasting about how logical and how much common sense they have, when it's all said and done, as the author here alludes to, making important decisions and incorporating common sense is a bad strategy. What we may be better off doing is simply abandoning the predictions and the predicting of the future altogether and just living and deciding to react to the present based on our own real and measured observations, rather than trying to create something in the future that may not be there in the present. So stick to what is working is what the author talks about. Stick to what is working, and simply just add to what is working. Don't try and change the world and create something completely different to what you currently have, because it may not work. As the author reminds us here, stick to what is working and just increment, add to it. Make small incremental changes, and when you see things starting to fall off the rails or see things not being effective as they were before, then and only then consider making some changes and reviewing what you've already done. So the author then goes on to talk about making better decisions by building uncommon sense. Building better decisions by building uncommon sense. How important is that, and how interesting is that? Which relies on what they talk about here, the scientific method. Because when it's all said and done, and we've seen it time and time again in our own lives, where we think that we've got common sense, but things never work out the way they work out. Because most of the time your common sense is wrong. So if most of the time your common sense is wrong, then chances are that most of the time other people's common sense is wrong. So you're better off just being uncommon sensed in the beginning and just having a crack and letting things flow as they flow. The author then talks about the scientific method, and the scientific method simply is creating a hypothesis up front, then collecting data to back up or disprove your hypothesis, and adjusting your hypothesis to draw general conclusions along the way. So that's that book summary. So thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club. And we've just gone through a book entitled Everything is Obvious by Duncan Watts. We talk about common sense and how unreliable common sense really is. And basically giving us some ideas or giving us a background into understanding that we are all infected by a number of biases, groupthink, and other impacts such as that, such as the default bias, the priming bias, the anchoring bias. Let me just walk past again. So let's finish off with a positive affirmation. I'm alive, I'm well, I feel absolutely great. To my friends and family, stay connected, stay relevant, stay reasonable. I thank you for joining me on this episode of Jim's 5am Club, where we go on yet another journey, where we discover something new, something that we can incorporate into our lives, into our inventory of skills, and where we become partners in each other's development, where we can be the wind beneath our wings, the wave beneath our board, the wind that flutters our sails and fills our flags, and the propellers, the turbines that propel our craft in the direction that we desire. So I'll finish up there. So thank you very much, and let's live, learn, and pass it on, and enjoy this glorious weather that we're experiencing here in Sydney at this time of the year. And I look forward to coming to you again from a different location with a different message. Yassas, Filakya from Jim's 5am Club, and bye for now.